Hello and welcome to Scream Scene, the horror movie podcast where we watch every horror movie ever made in chronological order and then we rank them from best to worst. My name's Sarah.
And I'm Ben.
Thank you so much for listening today. Ben, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good today, which is nice. I've been a little down recently, but I'm feeling pretty good today. How about yourself?
I am all healed from the sickness that took me over and led to us missing a week. So thank you very much, everyone, for your patience. It was just a cold, but it was a head cold that just came out of nowhere and kicked me down. Like, I haven't been sick like that in a while.
Yeah, and we had like a pretty, I think, important episode, this one, to do. And so we wanted to make sure we were, at our best for everybody.
Yeah, if it had just been like one of those like drive-in whatever movies.
Yeah, attack from the bottom of the 30,000 foot sea monster.
Like maybe it could have powered through, but no, this is a movie that I wanted to make sure we did our best on.
Yeah, for sure.
So what are we watching today?
Today, Sarah, we are watching Carnival of Souls from 1962, directed by Herk Harvey. Now, you've never seen this movie before.
Correct. I've never seen it. I've been very excited for us to watch it. I don't really know anything about it. Just like, you see clips and stuff that get used in like, I don't know, compilations of like Criterion movies or whatever. And it just looks so like weird and neat. And just the idea of like Carnival of Souls, like, yeah. I know a little bit more about it now after doing some research, related to the movie, but I'm still very excited for this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a cult classic. Like, I think textbook definition, honestly, of a cult classic. It is a indie film from the early 60s, and it's really the brainchild of its writer-director team. So writer John Clifford and director Herk Harvey. And to talk about like where this movie came from and why this movie happened, it's probably best to start with Harvey and talk a little bit about him and the context in which this movie was made. So Harold Arnold Harvey, or...
That makes a lot more sense. I was like, I've never heard the name Herk.
Herk is like his... nickname, but it's also like the name on the movie. Like the movie doesn't say directed by Harold Harvey, it says Herk Harvey.
Yeah.
Harold Arnold Harvey was born in 1924 in Windsor, Colorado, and he served in the U.S. Navy during World War II and initially studied chemical engineering before deciding nuts to that. It wasn't for him, and entering the theater department at the University of Kansas in Lawrence, Kansas in 1945. He studied acting and directing, and he appeared in or helmed a large number of productions throughout his time with the drama department there. He got his degree, he got his graduate degree, he got his doctorate degree.
Damn.
Before becoming an instructor at the drama department at the University of Kansas and continuing to direct plays.
Dang, dude.
Just stuck with it all the way through. In 1950, he married actress Bernice Brady, who appeared in several of his productions, and she also taught drama at the local high school. Harvey began acting in films for the Centron Corporation, a Lawrence-based producer of industrial, corporate, and educational films. This was like a highly successful company. They made, depending on what generation you're from, they made either like 16 millimeter or video tape kind of films for corporate training or industrial safety or classrooms. So whenever the teacher like
rolls out the the TV
exactly.
on the rolling desk.
Exactly. Yeah. And these would have been, there were other firms in the US that produced like similar videos, but Centron
was the central one.
Yeah, they did really well, despite like not being on either coast, right? So yeah, he started acting for the Centron Corporation, doing these kinds of educational industrial films. And eventually he joined the staff in 1952 as a director, writer, and actor. And he would go on to make something like 400 films for Centron over a 30-year period.
Wow.
He was often paired with writer John Clifford, who taught journalism at the local high school, wrote Western novels, and also composed lyrics for songs that were written by Angelo Badalamenti, who is like best known as the composer for most of David Lynch's movies.
Okay. This is wild.
But at the time, he mostly wrote songs for like Nina Simone and people like that, and Clifford would write the lyrics.
Wild.
So yeah, Harvey and Clifford were this team making all of these educational safety, whatever videos, training videos. And the impetus for this film, Carnival of Souls, came when Harvey was driving back to Kansas after shooting a Centron film in California. Because they would send the crew out to all these different places to shoot. And this is early 1960s, so we're kind of not quite yet at like air travel being super affordable. So he's like just driving, right? All around the country. And along the way back, Harvey drove past the abandoned Salt Air Pavilion in Salt Lake City, which was this kind of like lakeside sort of amusement park kind of thing with like a merry-go-round and this sort of stuff. And he had this image in his mind of the dead rising from the lake to come dance in the ballroom of the Salt Air Pavilion. And so once he was back in Lawrence, he decided he wanted to direct a feature film. And he asked Clifford to write a script, telling him that it could be anything he wanted so long as the ending was the ghouls dancing in the ballroom. And Clifford wrote the script in 3 weeks. And it's not an adaptation, but he takes a lot of inspiration from this short story, An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. And I thought you could tell us a little bit more about that short story and where it comes from.
For sure. Have you heard of this short story?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of a notable one from a pretty notable author named Ambrose Bierce. So Ambrose Bierce was born in 1842 in Ohio. He was a highly influential journalist, satirist, and realist fiction writer. He would write horror, but it was primarily psychological horror. Now, when he was born, it was in a log cabin in the middle of nowhere. He ultimately would have 12 siblings, so very modest roots. He would become a printer's devil at 15. Do you know what a printer's devil is?
No.
I learned this while doing this research. It's like a fun term for someone who's an apprentice at a print shop.
Sure.
Or like printers.
But why would you call them a devil?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. I mean,
isn't that fun?
Yes.
Mark Twain was a printer's devil as well.
Okay, that weirdly makes sense to me, yeah.
He enlisted in the Union Army for the American Civil War when it started in 1861, and he saw several major battles, including Battle of Rich Mountain, Shiloh, Philippi, and suffered a pretty severe head injury at Kennesaw Mountain in 1864, to the point where he had to be out of commission for several months. He would go back to fighting to see the end of the Civil War. These war experiences are core to his fiction work, and also made him staunchly against the glorifying or like romanticizing of the American Civil War that you see in the post-war period.
Yeah.
After the Civil War, he would settle in San Francisco and become a journalist, starting with kind of a crime beat and expanding it into news and eventually an opinion column. He was on the staff at the San Francisco Examiner, which was owned by William Randolph Hearst, and played a key role in exposing a railroad financing bill in 1896. Hard-hitting journalist.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout this time, he's writing short stories, he's writing humor stories, he's kind of writing a little bit of everything. And the short story An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge would be published in 1890. As far as like published book works, they are mainly collections of the different things that he would put out, including his column, his news reporting, essays, poetry, his short stories, satire, just a whole gamut of genres that he was writing in. The Owl Creek short story would be included in the Tales of Soldiers and Civilians that was published in 1891, a collection of his short stories that are very focused on the American Civil War. Now, he's kind of taken as an example of having that clear, simple style of writing that you can kind of see come from journalism. And a lot of people tie this into him being an influence on Hemingway, who also comes from journalism, but Ambrose Bierce is kind of a major figure leading into Hemingway. Bierce's realist nature with psychological twists at the end are also fairly influential on writers like H.P. Lovecraft. So a very full life, a lot of writing throughout his life. And then at age 71, which is about 1913, so it happens to be about 3 years into the Mexican Revolution, and he decided it would make sense for him to go down to Mexico to be an observer. I think kind of channeling his journalism roots. And so he would join not join to fight, but join to observe.
Yeah.
the Pancho Villa's army. And his last known location is near the city of Chihuahua, where he disappeared. The last letter that he wrote, this would be like December 1913. He wrote, "I leave here tomorrow for an unknown destination," and then was never heard from again.
Well, that could be a spooky mystery, or it could be just what happens when
an American is in Mexico during their own Civil War.
When a 71-year-old goes to join up with the guerrillas in, a war.
Yeah. Yeah, he, in some of these other letters, he would say that he wasn't afraid of the firing squads and executions going on because it, quote, beats old age. There are quite a few theories about what happened to him, including some that are like off the wall, like, oh, he was abducted by aliens.
Yeah,
like, my God, goodness, guys, come on. One plausible theory is that his personal life wasn't great. And the theory is that he kind of wrote that to be mysterious and then headed up to the Grand Canyon to commit suicide.
Oh.
But most likely what happened is he was executed by a Hurtista firing squad.
Sure.
Most likely.
Yeah. He went into a war zone and didn't come back. That's not super unusual. That happens to a lot of people who go to war zones, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would have been, his last letter is December 1913. So people usually put his death in around 1914. So about 24 years after writing the short story that I'm talking about today, An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. The short story follows a pro-Confederate civilian and slave owner named Peyton Farquhar.
Sure.
It's an odd spelling of a last name, but I'm going to go with Farquhar. And he is about to be hanged on the Alabama Bridge at Owl Creek by Union soldiers. Now he's trying to think of a way to escape, and we do get a little bit of a flashback as he remembers how he got into this situation, remembering that a Confederate soldier had come to his plantation and he and his wife had offered him some, a mint julep as it were, and the Confederate soldier, who was actually a Union soldier in disguise, suggested that someone should blow up the bridge that the Union soldiers have taken. Anyone, civilian or soldier, would be hanged for interfering with a bridge or other kind of infrastructure. So that's unfortunately what's happened to Peyton here. And as he is trying to think of a way to escape, he is pushed off the bridge. And as he falls, the rope breaks and he manages to swim to safety while being shot at. Now, between the location of the bridge from his house and then also where the river kind of took him, he's about 30 miles from home. So he has to walk back home while also still being on the run. As he's walking, he's going through an endless forest and he begins to hear whispered voices that are potentially hallucinations. And as he finally makes it back to his plantation, his wife cries at seeing him and they are about to embrace when he suddenly feels a sharp blow to his neck and then everything goes dark. And then we hear the narration describing his body hanging from Owl Creek Bridge. His escape and return home were imagined between the drop and the breaking of his neck. Now, while Bierce was not the first to do this kind of subjective imagining at the time of death in literature, I think his tying of it to a Civil War context made it resonate. The fact that he was already fairly prolific meant that any of his works would be fairly widely read. A collection of short stories about the Civil War would be widely read, and help this short story take its place in public consciousness. It is frequently adapted, specifically though the structure, not necessarily beat for beat this type of story.
Yeah, it's one of those stories that's like become like almost like a stock story idea, like more than adapting the story itself. Like even beyond seeing this idea done straight up on like TV or movies or whatever, it's also like, I think, accidentally become like a weird...
Like a framing device.
But also you see it all the time kind of in like weird internet Reddit things about like, here's why, like, I think this like children's TV show was secretly dark. Like, what if Toy Story was all just... Andy's weird imaginings on his deathbed or whatever. And
sure.
You know what I mean? And it's like, ugh.
Yeah. And you had said this before we were recording, but it's kind of like Rashomon in the fact that like everyone adapts the Rashomon structure, not necessarily the beat for beat story. Like Batman, the animated series has a Rashomon episode. American Dad has an Owl Creek episode.
Right.
There are direct adaptations of the short story, though, particularly in early cinema. There was a 1929 silent film by Charles Vidor that came out in 1959. There was an adaptation of it on Alfred Hitchcock Presents. And then in 1961, because release dates aren't exact at this time, there's a French short film called La Rivière du Ribot, directed by Robert Enrico, that is particularly notable because it's exactly an adaptation, and it won Best Short Subject at the 1962 Cannes and Live Action Short at the 1963 Academy Awards. It was actually a part of a trilogy of shorts adapting Bierce short stories. The other two were adapting the short story Chickamauga, which is also a Civil War story, and The Mockingbird. This is technically after this movie, but in 1964, this 1961 short would be run as part of an episode of The Twilight Zone, which again speaks to how big that short film was. So I wouldn't be surprised if the timing lines up that the writer of A Carnival of Souls has it kind of front of mind. Though there's nothing about a Carnival of Souls or a carnival where ghouls are dancing that ties in with Owl Creek. So I suspect that this is going to be a case of adapting the structure, not the Civil War context.
Yeah, exactly. It's not an adaptation. It's merely a very strong like inspiration on the story. As I sort of mentioned, the impetus was this image of ghouls dancing in the ballroom at the Salt Air Pavilion, and then Clifford was given the freedom to just kind of like come up with whatever story you want that leads to that moment. the Salt Air Pavilion was originally built on the south shore of the Great Salt Lake in 1893 as like an amusement park resort. It was kind of intended to be the Western equivalent of Coney Island.
Okay.
And this kind of like tourist destination. They had like the railway had a stop at it. It was like along your major routes for getting into the city from like outlying communities. And it had what was called Moorish Revival architectural style. So sort of this like Victorian American interpretation of like Arabic sort of looking architecture with like minarets and things.
Okay.
Really kind of pretty. It was a big attraction. People would come out, on weekends to go there from Salt Lake City. And then in 1925, it burned down.
Oh.
And so then they built a second version, which opened in 1929. And it was kind of like a bigger, expanded version with like multiple buildings and things. But nonetheless, it paid homage to the original design by retaining that Moorish Revival architectural sort of influence. Unfortunately...
Did it also burn down?
Yes, but not yet. Unfortunately, the Great Depression... competition from movies and radio as sources of entertainment, as well as changing commuter patterns, all resulted in reduced revenue. Like people weren't taking that train line as much. The sort of commuter routes for getting into Salt Lake City from these outlying communities changed, etc. Then there was a temporary closure during World War II. After that, the traffic never really picked back up. So the second Salt Air closed down in 1958. And it was in this abandoned state that Carnival of Souls shot there.
Oh, they actually got to shoot on location.
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was finally, that is the second Salt Air Pavilion was finally destroyed in an act of arson in 1970. So it also burned down.
It also burns down.
Yes. A third Salt Air was opened in 1981 with, in my opinion, a rather tacky mall-like design.
It's the 80s.
Yeah, but it still paid some tribute to the original appearance. It's kind of like, imagine an 80s mall, but it's got like minarets at like the corners sort of thing.
Yeah.
Only months after it opened, the lake flooded it. And so it suffered all this like salt corrosion, water damage. After the water receded, like a bunch of money was put into fixing it up. But then the water continued to recede so far that the structure was no longer lakeside. So it was like no longer a picturesque sort of place to go. And by the 90s, it was once again abandoned. However, in 2005, a group of local music venue producers got together, put some money into it, and since then it has seen success as like a concert venue for like local music acts.
Oh, nice.
And it's like still going strong. So
love that.
Yeah, so a nice little happy ending for the Salt Air Pavilion.
In its fourth or fifth incarnation.
Yeah, exactly. In writing the screenplay, Clifford sort of engaged in the time-old indie tradition of writing being inspired by what's available to you, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, we're going to shoot at Salt Air Pavilion. So that means we're going to be in the Salt Lake City area for a bit of this, but also we're usually based in Lawrence. So like, what are some locations around Lawrence that could give you like a creepy atmosphere without costing a lot of money? And one of the big places he thought of was the Reuter Organ Company in Lawrence, which made like church organs and had this like big room for like testing the sound of the organs that Clifford thought was really creepy. So for that reason, the lead character of the movie plays an organ.
Love it.
And freed from any kind of need to follow Hollywood conventions or formula, Clifford kind of delighted in small rebellions against those formulas, like not including a romantic subplot, and also keeping the horror tension high by not having a single character in the movie sympathize or ally with the story's heroine in any way.
So no help or support in any...
Yeah, exactly. No one is on her side.
Yeah.
Yeah, she is alone and isolated for various reasons.
Various spooky reasons.
Yeah, exactly. You got it. The majority of the film's cast would be made up from the same core of amateur actors that Centron used for its regular projects, including Harvey himself as the lead ghoul, credited in the film's credits just as the man.
Okay.
But for the film's lead role, they did need a real actress. So they hired Candace Hilligoss for $2,000. She was born Mary Candace Hilligoss in South Dakota in 1935, and she studied acting in New York under Lee Strasberg and Sanford Meisner. So she's a method actress, basically. She acted on stage, occasionally on TV, and she also worked as a dancer and model for extra cash. Carnival of Souls was her first film appearance. She turned down another horror film, Violent Midnight, which we won't get to until 1963, in order to appear in Carnival of Souls. But she regarded the job as kind of like a take the money and run situation. She only ever appeared in one other film, the 1964 horror film Curse of the Living Corpse. So Carnival of Souls remains her best-known role. She married actor Nicholas Coster, and they had 2 daughters, but they divorced in 1981. After Carnival became a cult classic, she wrote a screenplay for a sequel, but it was never produced. And she is, as of this recording, 90 years old.
Wow, that's cool.
The film shot for 3 weeks in Lawrence and Salt Lake City. Harvey and his crew of Centron staff took 3 weeks off to make the film. The picture had a budget of $30,000, $17,000 of which was raised from local businesses investing $500 each into the production. One of those investors was Pauline G. Pappas, who would go on to become Harvey's second wife, as he divorced his first wife in 1960 after she had been unfaithful to him. So when he's making this movie, he's divorced, but he's going to marry one of the investors. Harvey paid off the film's locations for their use kind of as they went, shooting the film guerrilla style. So they would like show up at a location, be like, hey, can we film here? The people would be like, I don't know about that. And then Harvey would slip them a 20 and then they'd film there kind of thing. They used a handheld battery-powered Arriflex camera for moving shots. So this is like a small 16 millimeter camera that newsreel guys would have used, or by this point, I guess, TV news guys in the 60s. And so that allowed them to do moving shots without a crane or a dolly. It also allowed them to do shooting in cars where they didn't have the money for compositing or rear screen projection or anything. So they had to shoot in real cars, really driving. But the small handheld camera meant that, like, you know, the camera guy could like hide in the back seat or whatever, right?
Yeah. This is firmly in the, we can't afford to do it fake, so we're doing it for real.
Exactly, yeah. The crew worked 7 days a week for those 3 weeks of shooting and consisted of like a handful of people, like 5 other people on set at any time, basically, including cameraman Maurice Prather and assistant director Reza Badiyi, who had been also the AD on Robert Altman's first film in 1957, which was shot in Kansas City, a low-budget film called The Delinquents. Badiyi would go on to serve as a director on TV shows like Mission Impossible, The Incredible Hulk, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And he also sort of specialized in creating title sequences for TV shows, such as the title sequences for Hawaii Five-0 and Mission Impossible. So the film paid $50 to the Salt Lake City Chamber of Commerce for the use of the Salt Air Pavilion. They paid $25 to shoot at a department store, and they paid $12 to run a car off a bridge.
Who did they pay for that? The troll?
Well, they had to pay for repairs to the bridge because the car goes through the railing.
Yeah. I guess it's more like the state government, like whoever was there,
whoever owned the bridge. Yeah. Harvey was aiming for the film to have, quote, the look of Bergman and the feel of Cocteau, which is
shoot high.
Yeah, pretty ambitious.
Yeah.
For a guy who mostly makes educational films. I'm assuming
also kind of shows like his film knowledge and like what he's drawing off of.
Oh, for sure. I mean, despite, the fact that he was making these educational shorts, he was super experienced. He made over 400 of them, and he had a doctorate in drama, right? Like he,
Yeah.
So he kind of knew what he was doing, right? I assume when he talks about the look of Bergman and the feel of Cocteau, knowing what I know about the film, they're going for the vibes we're going for here are a mix between like Seventh Seal and Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah.
Only in a completely modern setting, of course. We don't have money to do period.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure. I mean, it's period for us.
Sure. The movie had no money for compositing or other optical effects, so most every effect that you're seeing in this movie had to be done in camera. And the use of an organ in the film's story led to the decision to use an organ score by local organist and composer from Kansas City, Gene Moore. The film premiered on September 26th, 1962 at the Granada Theater in Lawrence, Kansas.
I hope they invited all of the investors.
Oh, of course they did. There was like a story in the newspaper in Lawrence that day that was like, Lawrence, the next Hollywood? It's more likely than you think.
That's so cute. That's such like small town.
Yes.
I love it.
It was picked up for distribution by Hertz Lion International, who cut the film by about 4 minutes in order to fit it on a double bill with The Devil's Messenger, a Lon Chaney horror movie that we aren't watching for the show because it's actually just 3 episodes of a Swedish TV series dubbed and edited together with Chaney appearing in linking scenes.
Oof.
Hertz Lion made a number of mistakes with this release, such as not copyrighting the prints.
Oh God, that's like number 1 on the list.
Yeah, so the movie just instantly went into public domain.
Yeah.
And while the film did play in drive-ins and theaters in the United States and Europe, it went almost entirely ignored by critics given its indie genre picture nature. And Hertz Lion actually quickly went bankrupt before they could even pay Harvey or anyone else like their royalty checks for the film, which meant that Harvey and none of those investors got any of their money back.
Wow, that sucks.
Harvey and Clifford continued working for Centron until the mid-'80s when the company finally ceased production. The relative failure of Carnival of Souls meant that he never made another feature film, although he did have several ideas over the years. Despite not being widely seen, Carnival of Souls did have an impact on those who did happen to see it in its original release, such as George A. Romero, who saw it at a drive-in and called it the biggest inspiration for Night of the Living Dead.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Also, aspects of the film would inspire David Lynch's Eraserhead.
Yeah. When I was researching the short story, there were a lot of like comparisons of the short story with Lynch's Lost Highway.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think you're going to see some of the Lynch stuff in here as well as the Night of the Living Dead stuff. Like, I think it's very clear that this movie influenced Romero and Lynch. And of course, Romero saw it at a drive-in, and Lynch's favorite composer for his movie scores was a collaborator with this film's author, right?
So he probably saw it through like a personal copy.
Yeah. These connections to these later filmmakers slowly gave the Little Scene film a sort of cult classic status by the 80s, like one of those movies that people talk about, but you can't seem to ever get to see anywhere, except on like late night TV prints. This led to a desire by the mid to late 80s for like retrospective screenings, and people started screening it at like Halloween festivals and things, and it started like slowly building this reputation. This kind of resurgence of interest and opportunity led Harvey and Clifford to produce a director's cut version of the picture for these retrospective screenings by editing back in the 4 minutes of deleted scenes into the movie. However, by the 80s, the only surviving master for those deleted scenes was a videotape master taken from 16 millimeter prints of the film, which were uncut and had been sent to TV. So while the 35 millimeter version had been cut for that double feature distribution, an uncut 16 millimeter print was sent for TV. And then by the 80s, those TV copies had been transferred to videotape. So the director's cut then needed to take that videotape, print it back to film, and integrate it back into the regular film for these retrospective screenings. But the process of doing that, creating this new print, allowed Harvey and Clifford to copyright the picture for themselves in 1987.
Good.
Critical attention began to come to the film at long last, and this culminated in 1989 with a full cast and crew reunion screening in Lawrence to celebrate the home video release of the director's cut. The film's cult following and critical reappraisal led it to being entered into the Criterion Collection as number 68.
Nice.
Which, like, today there's over 1,300 films in the Criterion Collection. So, like, 68 means that, like, it got in early.
Yeah.
Like, it was one of the first 100 films they thought about including, you know what I mean? Harvey did pass away in 1996 at age 71, but Clifford passed away in 2010, age 91. So Harvey did live long enough to like see this beginning of critical reappraisal, but like Clifford lived long enough to write an introduction for the Criterion Collection booklet.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I'm glad that they got to see people appreciating it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how are we watching it?
Well, Carnival of Souls, sort of as I've already mentioned, is available on DVD and Blu-ray from the Criterion Collection, and you can stream it on the Criterion channel. The public domain nature of the theatrical version does mean that like you can also just like watch it on YouTube or the Internet Archive or a million other places. But if you want to see like the best restored print of the film, the Criterion channel version is probably the one to check out.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of the Criterion releases also happen to be on something like Canopy, maybe even Tubi. Mm-hmm. So check those out as well. But I can't say enough positive things about the Criterion channel. Yeah,
the Criterion channel version includes all the special features from the Criterion Collection discs, which include the deleted scenes, some outtakes, commentary, and a selection of like, I think 5 or 6 of Harvey and Clifford's Centron short films.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
Wild. Well, folks, hopefully you can find a copy to watch along. You're going to hear a brief musical interlude, and when we come back, we will discuss Carnival of Souls from 1962, directed by Herk Harvey.
See you on the other side, everybody. Welcome back to Scream Scene, everybody. We just finished watching Carnival of Souls, directed by Herk Harvey. Sarah, what did you think?
So I really enjoyed this. I really liked the surrealist nature of it, the dreamlike nature. I think you can tell that it's like a cheap indie movie. I don't mean that in like a derogatory sense. I don't mean it in a complimentary sense. I just mean it as a descriptor.
Yeah.
Because it is.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that hampers it a little bit, but overall I think like I did enjoy this.
I'm glad sometimes when something gets built up too much, it becomes hard to enjoy.
But what helped is that I didn't really know much about it. It's not like someone's like, oh, this is the best horror movie that you'll ever see. Like, I just knew that it was supposed to be a good horror movie. And the specifically the Criterion DVD cover always caught my eye.
Gotcha.
It has like this weird angle of the chick's face. And yeah, her face just kind of looks like that. Yeah. So yeah, I enjoyed it. Have you seen this before?
Yes.
Okay. When did you first see it?
Probably when I was in film school.
Okay. So a while ago.
Yeah.
Has your opinion of it changed?
Not really.
Okay.
I think it's very good. Which, I mean, shocker that the like movie in the Criterion collection is very good, right? I think the thing I want to say most is I've read in places or heard occasionally this movie referred to in kind of like damning with faint praise kind of terms, or like as if it's only accidentally good.
Oh,
Like I've heard people talk about like, oh, how the acting and the dialogue are wooden or bad, or that it has like an Ed Wood quality to it. And that like, oh, it's like spooky atmosphere and like effectively creepy, weird mood is just like a weird byproduct of like the amateurness of the film. And I think all of that is totally off base.
I would agree.
I think the thing is some people never watch really terrible movies from the past.
But we have.
Right, exactly. And so like when you're used to a certain kind of film and you watch an old cheap indie movie like this, you're going to be like, that was really weird. I liked it, but I don't know why. The reason it was weird was probably because it was cheap. These people are probably, this is probably a bad movie, but I like it anyway, kind of thing. But that's not what's going on here. And once you've watched as many actually bad old horror movies as we have, you know what bad looks like. And this ain't it. I think everything that this movie is doing is very intentional.
Yeah. And I think it was a great choice to have Herk be the main ghoul.
Yes.
Because he delivered exactly what he knew he wanted to give. And
Yeah.
it just came together really, really well. I think like the Ed Wood-ness that people might recognize would be similar to elements that are from like John Waters, where they're using, I'll say, amateur actors in bit part isn't really the right word, but like
Supporting roles.
Supporting roles. There we go. And sometimes when someone delivers dialogue, it's like, oh, okay. Like that's a different way that I would have said it.
Yeah.
But also a lot of them did really, really well. Like the dude who played the Mr. Linden across the hall did really well at making me like be creeped out, and like did a really great natural performance.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, you know, some of the performances from the cast have some of those hallmarks of like industrial educational films, like the doctor character who like declares all of his dialogue in like shouts almost.
But also we've seen doctors in other movies,
Yeah.
quote unquote, better
Yeah.
in terms of budget movies, have doctors act like this.
And just like you, I was very impressed by the performance of Sidney Berger as Mr. Linden and also Frances Feist as Mrs. Thomas, because they feel like real people. Like Berger feels very well cast, doing a great job being the slimy creep, which is kind of a thankless job. And Frances Feist, who plays the landlady, Mrs. Thomas, reacts to things in a way that doesn't feel like a movie landlady, like that feels more like a real person.
Like, yeah, I think she needs to move out. This is weird. Like, very reasonable reactions.
Yeah.
I also really liked the minister.
Yeah. When he's very good as well. When Mrs. Thomas is telling Mary, the lead character, like, oh, you're just hearing things or you're just seeing things, which people say in horror movies all the time. The actress does a nice little bit where like, even though she tells Mary, like, you're all imagining it, she seems a little scared when she goes to leave because now, like, the thought's been put in her head. What if there's something out there, right? It's little things like that. We should probably talk about the story.
Yeah, I apologize.
No, that's fine.
So our lead character here, her name is Mary Henry, and she is riding in a car with her two friends when some boys challenge them to a drag race. During the race, they both cars are driving along a bridge, and the boys slightly nudge Mary's car, which causes the driver to lose control, and the girl's car goes through the guardrails and down into the high, muddy river. Now, there is a large rescue / kind of retrieval effort to try to find the submerged car. You get the feeling that some time has passed, but it's unclear how much time. And somehow Mary pulls herself onto the shore. After surviving something like that, she tries to pick up life where she left it, namely that she plays the church organ for the town where we are set, but she is now leaving for a job in Utah to be a church organist there. She's like, no, I'm leaving town, not even stopping to see my parents. While she's driving through Utah, she sees a pavilion in the distance and seems kind of drawn to it. And as she's driving through the night, she also begins to see a pale-faced man in the window. And this man seems to follow her through the whole movie. As she arrives in town, she learns a bit more about the pavilion, that it was an abandoned carnival and dance hall. And she goes and rents her room. Across the hall is a Mr. Linden. He probably has a first name. I don't recall if they say it. So I'll just be calling him Mr. Linden, but he is her age. And then she heads to the church and meets the minister where she'll be working. Now, throughout the movie and kind of throughout this part as well, Mary gets described as very cold, as kind of distant, as needing to put more of her soul into her music, that she's kind of too, intellectually focused on the music. And she's actually criticized for seeing this as like a job. You know, the church is just a place of business rather than recognizing the spiritual significance of music in a church. Now, it being her first day, the minister offers to drive Mary out to the pavilion that she was curious about, and she learns more about it. And then when she returns that night, she has to rebuff some advances from Mr. Linden, the neighbor across the hall. Now, the next day, she wakes up from a pretty bad nightmare that was focused all around the pavilion. And Mr. Linden knocks on her door saying, hey, I have some coffee. And she's actually glad for the company. She has the day off work, though, so she goes shopping. And as she is changing in the change room, she begins experiencing this reoccurring period where she can't hear people. She can't hear activities going on in the department store, and no one seems to be able to see, hear, or interact with her. Now she panics and ends up running out of the store, through the streets, and ends up in a park where her hearing seems to return. She goes to drink some water, and she believes that she sees that strange, pale-faced man again, and so she screams and runs into a man who we learn is Dr. Samuels. So he calms her down, invites her into his office, and listens to her story, and believes that, this incident of, not being able to hear, of seeing this pale-faced man, is all related to the trauma of the car accident. We do get to hear a little bit more about how Mary thinks of herself. And she says that, I'm a survivor, I'm headstrong, I pushed through, and I'll get through this.
Yeah. Isn't this the scene too, where she admits that she doesn't want to be with anyone? She's never thought of being around people, or doesn't need to be around people, and doesn't desire romantic connections, etc.
Yeah. And because all of this seems to be focused around the pavilion, she decides to drive out there herself. And during the daytime, it doesn't seem like anything is really super out of the ordinary. There are some weird sounds, or things seem to move, but overall, it's just an abandoned pavilion. When she heads back home, she runs into Mr. Linden again, and she agrees to meet him after work. After rehearsal. So then she heads to the church to do practice. And as she's playing, her song shifts into something eerie as she enters this kind of trance and begins seeing specters dancing in the pavilion. And her playing is interrupted by the minister, who is shocked by this music and calls it sacrilege and says, I can't have someone who's playing something like this play in my church, so you're fired. She still ends up going dancing with Mr. Linden, but she...
Only in, a matter of speaking.
Yeah, just like she seems to be kind of in shock that she's lost this job, and also shock, or rather kind of out of it because of the trance. And she says that she basically just doesn't want to be alone. Mr. Linden takes this that, we'll head back to our rooms, and hey, why don't you invite me in? She keeps kind of rebuffing him, and at one point she sees the pale-faced man in her mirror, embracing her like Mr. Linden's trying to embrace her, and she kind of freaks out, gets hysterical. So Mr. Linden's like, hey, bye, I'm not dealing with this. And we learn later from the landlady that basically Mary was up all night moving furniture around and was like pretty hysterical through the night.
Yeah, we see her like move a dresser to be in front of a window. So I feel like the implication was she moved all of the furniture so that no one could get in.
Yeah. Now, the next morning, the landlady brings in Dr. Samuels, who was stopping by because he was worried about Mary. And he's like, she won't accept my help. And the landlady's like, well, this is weird shit. I need her not to be a tenant here anymore. So Mary is like, okay, well, I'm going to leave town. She packs up. And as she's driving out of town, her car starts to make this weird sound. She takes it to a mechanic's, and they like lift the car up while she's still in it. And she starts to hear the pale-faced man approaching, and we see this like hand turn the knob so that her car goes back down. And suddenly she's being chased by this man, as she also enters another period of like not being able to hear and people not being able to see her. And it lasts longer than usual. So she ends up really freaking out. She's like, I just need to get out of town. So she goes to like a Greyhound bus station, tries to buy a ticket, can't, tries to board a bus, but inside are all of the ghouls. So she runs out of that. She manages to make it back to that park where it returned the first time. Miraculously, her hearing returns. So she goes to see Dr. Samuels again. She's trying to explain to him how, it's like I can't tell what reality is. This man just won't let me live. Like, I can't tell what's happening. I feel like I'm not really here.
He's trying to bring me back somewhere.
Yeah, and she doesn't really know where. And then the doctor's chair turns to reveal the pale-faced man. So she screams and leaves and ends up driving back to the pavilion because she seems to be like drawn there. Now, at the pavilion, she seems to kind of be in a trance as she walks through yet again. And important to note, the last time she was here, it was daytime, and now the sun is setting. As the sun sets, she has a vision of people rising from the lake and going to dance in the dance hall. And she sees herself join them and is dancing with the pale-faced man while also standing on the sidelines. And she screams when she realizes what's happening. The ghouls all start to chase her, and as she is running, they end up tackling her on the beach, and she screams. The next day, Dr. Samuel, the minister, and the cop are all out here. They had found her abandoned car, and the cop says, her footprints lead here to where there's a big, like, kerfuffle in the sand where it's like she was tackled, but there's no sign of her. Meanwhile, back home, they pull up the submerged car and they find Mary's body right alongside her friends. And that's the end.
One thing I really like about this movie, and it's just like a very small detail, but it makes a lot of sense, is everywhere is where it really is and is what it's supposed to be. What I mean,
I don't know what you mean.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
What I mean by that is that like the small town she starts out in is Lawrence, Kansas, where they're filming it. And then she like is explicitly moving to Salt Lake City in Utah, which is where they film the next bit. And the abandoned pavilion is just the Salt Air Pavilion. It has the same history. Like there was something really refreshing about places playing themselves because we're so used to like, hey, here's some stock footage of New York before we cut to the streets of Vancouver or whatever, where like places are never allowed to be themselves. And so it was kind of nice that, like they didn't have to make up any kind of weird story about the Salt Air Pavilion because
It just is what it is.
It just is what it is, and it's not necessary to do so, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think having the opportunity to film on site really added to the creepy nature of that place.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you would effectively create that creepy atmosphere if you had to build it by hand.
It would be very expensive, right?
Yeah.
Like it would be extremely expensive. So I have a weird question for you, because personally, I feel like the movie's very clear, but you see discussions online. So I want to ask you, what is your interpretation of the story of this movie? Like, what is going on?
A strong-willed ghost fights against the afterlife.
Yeah. Yeah. I would basically agree with that.
Yeah.
I've seen people, because it has that inspiration from Owl Creek Bridge, there's a lot of like, oh, nothing in this movie like it was all in her head, right? Like in the same way as Owl Creek Bridge is, where it's like, oh, she died and this was what her imaginings were as she died, kind of thing. And
you know the biggest piece of evidence that that's not the case?
There are scenes that she's not in.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. One thing as well that I think causes a lot of different interpretations is like, this isn't a Bruce Willis in The Sixth Sense situation where no one ever interacts with her throughout the movie and somehow she just doesn't find that odd. Like, people see her, people react to her, people see her come out onto the beach, right? And they're like, oh my God, how did you survive? And like, you know, she gets a room and she gets a job and she has these moments where people can't hear her or see her or interact, but then she kind of goes back to physical reality. The director somewhere in an interview has said that she's a poltergeist.
Okay.
Which, like, traditionally speaking, what a poltergeist is, as distinct from like a regular ghost, is that poltergeists are a type of ghost that can interact physically with the world.
Yeah.
Like, your normal ghost can't pick up a chair and throw it at you. Their arm will move right through it, kind of thing, right? And so what we're being sort of told is exactly what you said. Like, she is a ghost, but she's holding on to life so badly that like she has physical reality for parts, but she loses her grip on that as the story is going on, right?
Yeah. And I think the other thing that makes it very like that it's not all in her head is because she's never been to this pavilion. She doesn't know anything about this pavilion or this town.
I love that, like, the strange pale-faced man isn't anybody, right? Like, the psychologist is like, is he like an old acquaintance or maybe your father or something? And I love that, like, she has this section of the movie where she's looking for the psychological explanation, because it's 1962 and all the movies are doing
psychological things.
Yeah. Like the first scene where she's in the car driving from Lawrence to Salt Lake City at night, and she's like this blonde woman driving in this car. And I was like, this is how Psycho opens.
I was thinking that too.
Right. And this is like such an interesting rebuttal to Psycho, where like the psychologist is like, yeah, you went through like a huge trauma. And so it seems normal to me that you'd be like hallucinating and having like weird experiences. Is this like man, someone important in your life? And we've seen so many movies lately where the way the plot would go is like some man in her life would be like, you just have to face what you're afraid of. And then that would make her go to the pavilion. And then we'd find out that like, oh, her dad brought her there as a small girl and then he drowned there and she suppressed the memory and was like raised blah, 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 right? And instead it's like, no, none of that works.
And she's not scared of the pavilion. She just is curious about it and just seems to continually hold her attention.
Yeah.
And I really love the tragic nature of it. Like it's this young woman who is on the cusp of like leaving her small town and going to the big city, quote unquote, big city, because it doesn't really feel like a big city that she goes to. But in any case, who's on the cusp of starting her life. She's finished school and now she's going to follow her dream of playing an organ as her job. And then her life is tragically cut short and she's not ready to let go of it. And it really reminded me of the ghost stories that were coming out of Fukushima after the 2011 tsunami.
Oh, sure. Okay.
There's this one in particular where a taxi driver was driving around at night and he picks up someone. She's like drenched in water, even though it's not raining. And she asks to be taken to an area that was actually hit by the flood pretty badly. She doesn't seem to realize like that is going to be pretty demolished. And then according to the taxi driver, she asks something along the lines of like, am I dead? And then she fades away. So from your reaction, it sounds like that's a pretty commonly told ghost story. But there are a lot of ghost stories out of Fukushima in that same sense of like the people who are interacting with the unexplained and the supernatural that has this consistent theme of they don't know they're dead or they're not ready to actually pass on because it was so tragic.
And I think there's some really clever things done in this movie to tell that story, because it is a version of that story is sort of a typical urban legend kind of style story. But I think what's so smart about this movie is that it's from Mary's point of view entirely, right? So the scare isn't like, oh, me, a normal minister, I didn't realize I was talking to a dead person the whole time. Instead, it's this fear of like, you're dead and you don't know it. And also that means that it has like a better mystery to it. And it just like becomes this much more interesting story. Also, like, as far as ghost stories go, it's so much more interesting that this is a story about like a haunted person as opposed to a haunted place.
Yeah.
Like, as creepy as ghosts can be, a lot of times the answer to ghosts is like, just leave the house, right? And she can't escape as easily here. And yeah, like the pavilion being used as this kind of like metaphor for the liminal space between life and death, right? It's the Carnival of Souls. This is where all the ghosts go at night to have fun. And so that's why she's drawn to it, because she's dead and should be there, right? And like the man who's trying to like take her there is almost like a Grim Reaper figure, almost like a version of death or something. He's the leader of the efforts to get her back there anyways, but he doesn't represent anything specific in her life. And when she thinks it's a psychological thing and she's trying to like fix that, the movie points out on several occasions how like isolated she is, or that she's very cold, or like she's not very personable and she's not really interested in being around other people. You know, that, as you said, the organ's just her job. And then she like about faces on going out on the date with Mr. Linden. And it's almost as if she's like, well, if this is all in my head, like maybe the solve is that I need to be around people more and like whatever. And then like that doesn't fucking work, because that's not what her problem is.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I think really well written in a lot of places, where it has that dream-like nightmare logic essence to it that I really like in movies like Vampire or Dementia. But when you actually sit down to examine it, all the pieces do fit once you
100%
like realize what's happening. Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, I think it's a bit more spooky that people were interacting with a ghost than like she slowly realizes that no one can interact with her. You know what I mean? I think my favorite part of the movie is when she enters that organ trance, because I really enjoyed the decision to have the soundtrack be organ music because she plays the organ. Unfortunately, I did find it frustrating when like the music, you know, the soundtrack's just doing the soundtrack thing, and you know, when she's driving, she's like fiddling with the radio, and I wanted it to be more clear of like, is the music that we're hearing what she's hearing, or is it diegetic or not? And I think like you could have a reading that it is, or you could have a reading that like they just didn't add in the sound effects, because otherwise like the music continues through the scare, like there's no definitive tying of it to that radio station thing. And there are other moments too where like the organ music, I think it would have been really cool to have it fading in and out as if she's hearing it as the soundtrack to the dead, you know?
Sure. I think there are some really interesting ambiguities with the score. I really like that moment in the car where like you go from being like, wait, was that the score or is that the music on the radio? And then the implication that she can't escape it because it's the same on every station. It doesn't change at all as she moves the dial, right? But then it does it other times too, like where the music's just going along and then she's playing the organ and it's like, was she playing what we were just hearing? And it kind of like not literally fades, but like one moment it's diegetic and the next it's not, right?
Yeah. And so I think if they had either like a little bit more money or like something that would allow them to have a little bit more time on that particular aspect, they would have been able to do something really cool. And it's just one of the examples of the indie cheapness of it kind of holding it back from being like really, really amazing. I think it's really good. And I don't think it's good despite its cheapness or indie-ness. It's like, oh, a missed opportunity, but that's okay.
I think for me, I really like that isn't clear. I like the ambiguity that's created, where it's never clear if it is diegetic or not, or even that it blends in and out. I think the use of the organ is so clever in another way, which is that the organ fits the church. Mm-hmm. The organ also fits the carnival.
Yeah.
Right? Like that papa kind of music.
They were doing a waltz with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other thing that the organ's really good at is like weird, creepy ambient noise, right?
Yeah.
And so the soundtrack really effortlessly will go from like melody, church to carnival to just these like wee kind of like, ambient weird sounds.
Yeah.
And it just like really works throughout the movie. Obviously, when you have no money, it's very smart to make your movie a mood piece.
Yeah, it does mean that like the second time that she can't hear anything and people can't see her, it goes on a little too long, in my opinion. I think that there could have been ways to tighten it up. I really enjoyed the bus part, getting on the ghoul bus.
Haha.
I think having it be a mood piece really helped with the fact that like I think they were doing all of the audio ADR'd.
Yeah, that's one of the things I want to talk about for sure. I think before I do, I want to address your point about like doing the no one can see her or hear her bit again and that going on a little long. I didn't really feel that way because one of the things I thought this movie was really good at was slowly ratcheting up the tension and providing like an arc to the story, even though nothing really happens in the story. Like there isn't really a plot, but they like increase the pressure on Mary gradually. It starts out as small things. It gets worse and worse. And I was really impressed that it didn't feel repetitive or like wheel spinning when, we repeat the segments where she's not being seen or heard. There's also 2 visits to the pavilion. But the repetitions didn't feel like padding the way that they do in a lot of other horror movies where it's like, oh, back to the pavilion again. Instead, they feel like escalations. They feel like the way that repetitions work in like a fairy tale.
Yeah.
Or like a ghost story, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's due to the dreamlike nature of it. Like even when I was putting together the synopsis, I was like, when does she go? Like it felt like things could go in any order.
Yeah, totally. As for the sound thing, coming back to this idea that this is like a cheap indie movie, most noticeable to me is that the movie avoids the most common mistake of first-time indie films, which is bad sound. And it makes sense that they avoid bad sound because these aren't first-time filmmakers.
Yeah, it's the first time for like a feature of their own, but like they've made 400 fucking movies.
Yeah, and so like sometimes it is very obvious that the lines are being replaced with ADR because they don't quite have the sophistication to like, do the sound mixing necessary to make it sound natural. But you know what? At least you can always hear what people are saying
100%.
And I think the rest of the sound design shows a lot of like great intentionality, like the little detail that, you know, when people can't see or hear Mary, the sound of the rest of the world kind of drops out and she can't hear anything else, but we still hear her footsteps, the little click-clack of the heels going around.
And her internal monologue, because it echoes around and as if she's like in a hollow space. Mm-hmm. I also really liked when, I think it's really interesting that like both times when she comes back to it is when she's in nature.
And here's a bird.
Yeah.
Both times, yeah.
I think that there's something to that. I'd love to dig into it more. I can really see David Lynch really liking this movie. Yeah, I couldn't remember his name, so I just typed in David Lynch weird guy in Google, and the mystery man from Lost Highway popped up, and I was like, perfect, that's who I'm talking about. His style of makeup is very inspired from The Pale Man. And of course, as we talked about earlier about Romero's drawing from this, I think the fact of like, I think there's two things, honestly. The ghouls, I keep calling them ghouls. They're specters.
Yeah.
But like when they are chasing after her, so that kind of zombie chasing after, though, like in the past, we've been seeing zombies like gathering en masse and that being scary. But I think the other thing is that they are repeating what they did in life.
Right.
And that's very much in, I want to say it's Dawn of the Dead in the mall.
Yeah.
So I see that as being tied to Romero.
I also feel like the makeup here like really is a big stepping stone to the look of zombies in Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of period where like in Night of the Living Dead or Dawn of the Dead, they didn't quite have the sophistication we have now where zombies like literally look like corpses. Instead, they look like recently, like freshly dead people, like from the morgue, right? Like sallow and the sunken in eyes and all of that. And like there is makeup on the specters, the ghosts in this movie that really remind me of what the zombies look like in Night of the Living Dead, especially because they're both in black and white. Obviously, you've got this aspect of them chasing her at the end that's like, yeah, like kind of the first sort of zombie kind of like...
The undead chasing a presumably living person.
Right. And like how much of modern horror is that image, right? I think that what's really interesting about these images of like them going after her and her resisting them and her characterizing it as like, oh, they want to bring me back and all of this is whether it is Mary's isolation from society or her fear of these ghouls getting to her to make them join her, the overwhelming desire she has is she just wants to be left alone. Yeah. Like whether it's the dead or the living, people are always trying to get her to join them, you know, and she doesn't want to. That brings me to a question I wanted to talk to you about, which is what do you think of Mary as a protagonist? I think it's really notable that we never really see what she was like when she was alive.
One of the deleted scenes talks about it.
Yeah, where it's like, oh, she was always strange, right? But it's also interesting to note that like the Mary that we see throughout the film is someone who starts the film being close friends with the kind of girls who would get into a drag race against some boys.
Yeah, like the driver, she's driving and has like a cigarette in her hand at the same time. Like it was very funny. And I kept thinking also like, have these guys made a movie about dangerous driving?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely they have. But like the girls in the car are packed like 3 to the front row. Like no one's sitting in the back seat, right? Everyone's sitting right next to each other, like super close. Like they feel like girlfriends who are hanging out, like young people. And, you know, you contrast that with like this Mary we see after the accident who like doesn't want to be around people at all, right? So yeah, like my question is like how much of her aloofness is because of her being dead now, right? And I know the deleted scene sort of suggests she was always like this, but the other aspect of her that I find kind of interesting is in 1962, I wonder if her dislike of social company, her disinterest in religion or men, and her like very career-minded attitude might have made her come across as unsympathetic or unlikable to a 1962 audience. Whereas like for a modern audience now, I think she's very relatable and very sympathetic. And I think like many women today, and probably even then, would find her desire to just be left alone very relatable, right?
Yeah, I was thinking about, especially when she says, like, I don't think I've ever wanted to be with someone. And she says it and she's like, I don't think I've ever realized that before.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you mentioned in the beginning that the writer often liked to find ways to buck social norms.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is a case in point of that. But more than that, I also wonder how much of that is for like the audience of the time to go like, yeah, something's off. Like, clearly, like, why would this young woman not want to be related to society? Oh, because she's not of this world.
Yeah. Yeah, that's clearly the conclusion we're meant to be drawing. But it's interesting how, once again, when a movie tries to create a character who is supposed to be othered, it ends up making them a character who is very sympathetic to people who feel like outsiders and people who feel othered.
Yeah, I was also thinking about folks who are on the asexual spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
Of not really wanting a kind of sexual relationship with someone, or for folks who are like, no, it can only really be like one particular type of person who I have a particular relationship with, or something like that.
Or the intersection of that with like neurodivergent experiences where it's like, I find it really uncomfortable to be around people, or you know, social activities really drain me really quickly, or that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
I just want to show up to work, do my job, and go home. I don't need to be involved in everything, right?
And the mood of, oh no, I agreed to go out and now I really don't fucking want to. Why did I make plans?
With all of that in mind, like, did you find Mary aloof or like unlikable, or weirdly like strange, or did you find her very relatable?
I found it very relatable.
So did I.
Yeah, and I think like part of that is that no one else in the story is particularly likable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's either ambivalent to dislike in the case of Mr. Linden, because he's a perv.
Yeah.
I liked having a protagonist be able to like speak specific to, I don't want these things. And I thought it was like interesting when she's interacting with Mr. Linden. Like, he's talking about how like he tried to do college, he wasn't super into it, he was more interested in girls, and she's trying to like meet him where he's at in a very masking kind of way.
Yeah, she's doing a lot of like mirroring, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like he complains about college, so she finds a way to express a statement about college that doesn't really give her opinion, but sounds like it's sympathetic to his. Like, I definitely recognized that kind of conversation, you know, when you're talking to someone who maybe you don't really like or you don't really get along with, but you don't want to cause a row, right? So, you know, he's like, I didn't like college because they wanted you to take a bunch of classes. And she's like, yeah, they will do that. Like,
yeah,
you know, I really liked that she was a female character who, yes, like isn't driven by romance or social acceptance, and also like defines herself as a realist. So she's the one who's like, no, it can't be ghosts. You know, there has to be an explanation, but also isn't willing to accept the psychiatrist's explanation of like, oh, it's your trauma, it's your dad or whatever. She's like, no, there's something, it's not all in my head. And it's also not ghosts. Like, she's like, something physically real is happening, right? Is what she thinks. And normally in these kinds of movies, men get characterized as the materialists and women get characterized as the ones who are like in touch with the spirits or whatever, right? And so it was really interesting to see this like strong-willed woman who is not willing to like accept the explanations she's being given, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that she can't accept what's going on is sort of the whole point of her character arc, right?
Yeah.
Moving to some more just like movie making stuff away from like character analysis stuff. I think for a cheap indie movie, it really manages some effective shots.
Yeah, especially knowing that it's at some points just a handheld camera.
Yeah. Great lighting in a lot of cases. That trance sequence has some really good lighting on her face and stuff, really effective, good framing, very good editing in
Yeah.
spots. And it all comes together, I think, to reinforce the story and the mood at every turn. And that to me is like further evidence that like everything here is intentional, right? Like nothing here looks the way it looks because of accident. Like there are very abnormal framings that the movie is finding for shots that you would pick intentionally, not accidentally, because the kinds of movies that are just like, oh, this is just like the shot that they got without thinking are the like cameras locked off on a tripod. We see everyone from the waist up and we don't move or pan kind of stuff. Like, there's so much memorable imagery here, like the ghouls rising from the water.
Yeah, I think at one point you see, so it's Herk.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's in a bathtub. I think they realized they needed an insert, and so he's in makeup in, I think, a bathtub. But it's quick enough that you're not really supposed to notice it.
That scene of them all dancing in the ballroom, as you said, is very memorable as an image. And I think even the use of fast motion when they are chasing Mary at the end manages to like elicit the sense of frenzied, accelerating unreality instead of the association with like slapstick that it usually does. Like, it's very like risky to have like, oh, they're fast motion running after her, because I think the risk is that people's mind will go to like Keystone Cops.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen for me. Instead, like I got this sense of like, they're unreal and everything's closing in around you, which I think is like the intent, right?
Yeah. I can't really explain why it felt so daring to do this thing, but when she's at the pavilion and sees herself dancing with the man, and she's in the makeup and as she's dancing, and then we cut back to her not in that makeup and clearly like freaked out as she's seeing this. There's something about allowing those two realities to exist side by side that felt daring in 1962.
Yeah, absolutely. You know why?
Why?
Kubrick hasn't made 2001 yet.
Oh, seeing himself in the bed.
Yeah. Where it's like him seeing himself at these different stages of life, and he sees himself and then he is that self, right?
Yeah.
And like after that kind of imagery, I think, becomes like known, because even though it's weird, that's a mainstream movie.
Yeah.
That hasn't come out yet. So this is not normal film language at this point, the idea that you could see a vision of yourself doing something. And I don't know if this is intentional, which, I mean, I know my whole argument here is that everything in the movie is very intentionally done, but I don't know if this is intentional, but I think it really adds to this, is earlier in her daytime visit to the pavilion. There are occasionally some weird edits. One of which, for instance, is an edit where she's standing on a balcony and we see her looking out. And then we cut to a shot that's like kind of overhead of her walking away from the building. Mm-hmm. And normal film language, if you are showing a shot on someone's face where they're clearly looking out at something, the reverse shot is what they are seeing. But in this case, the reverse shot shows her walking out of the building when we just saw her on the balcony. And that to me felt like that kind of, I'm watching myself doing the thing and now I am the me who's doing the thing kind of thing from 2001. And then they repeat it in the ballroom with the dancing. And so I don't know if that feels daring, because what sort of like indie movie of like this guy who makes safety videos basically is thinking of this?
It feels kind of like the Citizen Kane thing of Orson Welles being like, I want to do this without realizing it's breaking a film taboo or film rule, because that's how nightmare logic works, of seeing yourself doing the thing and then being the thing.
The other filmmaker I think of when I think of I'm watching myself in a horror situation while I'm standing by and I can't stop the me who's in the horror situation is David Lynch.
Yeah.
That's very Twin Peaks. That's very Cooper in the Black Lodge, seeing himself in the chair. So there's definitely, I think, this Lynchian connection. we'll talk about this more in 400 episodes or so when we finally get to his movies. But Lynch has said that like the Lynchpin, not to make a pun, image that his entire creative career is based around is this experience he had as a child where this woman in like the suburbs came running naked, like out of her house screaming, and nobody did anything. They just kind of like ignored her because it was so uncomfortable, the sight and the reality of it. And he was like so struck by that. And that's sort of an image or a central feeling that's like really crucial to his movies. But it's also one that we find here of this woman who's like not able to get help from anyone in her situation. And as much as the specters here become the ghouls in Night of the Living Dead, I also think there's a certain aspect where Mary here feels a lot like a precursor to Barbara in Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah, I think that her hair is very, very similar. Like, I think visually it's supposed to be paired.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, just like a lot of really cool things that when you look at this movie, like, you know, overall, I think that if Carnival of Souls has pitfalls, they come from the majority of the people working on it having not made a narrative feature film before. But I do think that every choice made in the film itself feels intentional, feels designed to tell the story, set the mood. Like, I do not think there's anything accidental about its effectiveness.
Absolutely. And I think back to Herk Harvey having this idea. And then one by one, as he tells the guy who writes it, the guy who ends up editing it, the folks who end up starring in it, and everyone going like, this is nothing like what we've ever done, but it sounds cool. And you're a cool dude. So yeah, let's give it a shot. And taking 3 weeks vacation to give this weird thing a shot. And it's weird. The fact that they were alive to see the reappraisal is really wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Because, yeah, I think that this deserves people's time. Let's move on to ranking. You made the pun about a linchpin, but I was also thinking about how this movie, you know, we saw that documentary about how did zombies go from Haitian to Romero, and I think it's Carnival of Souls.
Yeah, for sure. Because here they're dead spirits. They're not like physically risen people, but there's that imagery of them rising and all of that. Yeah. So I'm looking quite high.
Okay.
Do you want me to go first?
I started with a range and then I ended up with a spot.
Okay.
So maybe you should go first.
Okay. So I started by looking at the top 10.
Okay.
And thinking about, you know, how does this movie line up with those? Because that's how good I thought this was. Obviously, you know, I've shown in the past kind of a bias towards these sort of more nightmare ambient horror movies, I guess. But looking at the top 10, I looked and I saw Spiral Staircase at number 7, which also has this like female character who's very trapped in a situation that doesn't make sense to her. And then Horror of Dracula at number 8. And, you know, if this movie is sort of leaving the material world behind, Horror of Dracula is like very material. It's very like blood and color photography and busts and running across the, you know, the table and making a cross out of 2 candlesticks and whatever. It feels very like, I don't know if vulgar is the right word, but like of the reality of the world in a way. And so I felt like this could be better than Horror of Dracula. This kind of is a little bit more elevated, to use a controversial term. So that was kind of my ceiling. Looking down from there, you know, I did spot movies that I felt like this has kinship with, like, frankly, any Val Lewton movie. You know, stuff like Phantom Carriage or Isle of the Dead. But right below Isle of the Dead is Taste of Fear, which is very good, but brings us back into this like world of like, this is a mystery to solve with plot twists. And so I kind of felt like this is like a step beyond that kind of stuff. So that ended up being my range, 8 to 22.
Okay. So I am looking lower than you.
Okay.
Similar to you, I kind of started with like, what are the movies that Carnival of Souls really reminded me of and felt similar to? And of course, Vampire.
Mm-hmm.
So that's ranked at number 68. Dementia, ranked at number 94.
Mm-hmm.
I also was thinking about White Reindeer.
Mm.
You know, that elegiac element, a lot of like non-speaking parts.
Mm-hmm.
So that's at number 71. And then the more recent Cabinet of Caligari of like a woman who's trapped and can't get out. And in that case, it's a psychological element. But yeah. And that's ranked at 73.
Mm.
So with those in mind, I was like, okay, well, I guess that means that my range is from Vampire down to Dementia. Looking at Dementia at 94, I was like, you know, Dementia is really interesting and stuff, but I do feel like Carnival of Souls is like major steps above it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, this doesn't make sense. Let's go to the other side of the list. So to Vampire at 68. And, you know, there's Vampire, and then just a little bit below that is White Reindeer. And I was like, I feel like this is fitting really nicely. There's some other items in here that feel like there's some like kinship, like Seventh Victim
Mm-hmm.
and Eyes Without a Face.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt, thinking about Eyes Without a Face is at 72. And I was also thinking about how much this inspires. And a lot of what we had to say about Eyes Without a Face is how much gets riffed on.
Yeah.
So I felt like putting this either above or below Eyes Without a Face felt right to me. So my spot ended up being basically 72.
So I do think you're too low.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of that for me is I think this is better than Vampire. And like, I'm the big Vampire lover, you know, in this household. But as much as Vampire has that really effective horror nightmare logic kind of thing, Vampire's biggest problem is that if you are looking at it from like a story perspective, it's kind of like, so what? Like, this guy comes to this place, sees a bunch of weird stuff, meets a girl, and they leave the weird place. That's kind of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there isn't really much more to it than that. The rest of it's just kind of, you know, I mean, there is, but like, what I mean is that Vampire isn't about anything. Vampire is a lot of story elements designed to allow for the director to engage in these kind of like floaty, dreamlike horror, nightmare logic kind of thematic things, but there's nothing really there at the core. It's not about something. And Carnival of Souls is like, Carnival of Souls has a point that it's making and has a plot at hand. And so, you know, I would be looking above that. I can see this movie alongside like Page of Madness at 55. You know, there's Nosferatu and the original Cabinet of Caligari at 53 and 52. But I also see movies that are above those, that are things like X the Unknown and The Brain Eaters, that like, I don't think Carnival of Souls should go below.
So let me put this to you.
Mm-hmm.
Part of why I was looking on the lower side
Mm-hmm.
is because it has this amateur nature to it. And I do feel like there are parts where it hampers it.
Mm.
Another movie that we quite liked and ranked quite high, but was also like an indie movie, is The Mask at 13.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about The Mask versus this?
The Mask is like the reverse of this movie.
I guess so.
Because like The Mask is, this could be supernatural, right? But like, is it all in his head?
Sure.
And The Mask is also, compared to this movie, like very maximalist. Like Carnival of Souls is like, how can we make the creepiest movie we can with like nothing? You know, we have almost nothing at our disposal. And The Mask is like, what if it was in 3D? And what if we had like weird Aztec like sacrifice rituals and gore and violence and all this crazy stuff. As much as I really like The Mask for all of those things, I think I admire Carnival of Souls more. And as much as it is, indie and has those pitfalls because of it, I think there's the Citizen Kane element that you brought up of like, they didn't know any better and therefore they ended up with something really special. And I also think that it's such a great example of like doing so much with so little that I find it like more admirable, like as a film, that they didn't feel the need to like try to go for like weird shock or like gore or stuff where it was like, or nudity or other things where it's like, well, we have no money, so let's like do something that'll get people talking, right?
Sure.
Right above The Mask is Tokaido Yotsuya Kaiden, which is the best film version of Yotsuya Kaiden. I think if I was to make an argument against Carnival of Souls and in favor of other horror movies, it would be that like Carnival of Souls, I think, is a movie that's going to stick with you a long time after it's over. And it has some like creepy moments and a couple of like sort of jump scares here and there, but it's not like going to shock you. I don't think you're going to like scream in the audience at Carnival of Souls.
Yeah.
And there are other movies that are doing more to want to like actively try to like scare you in the moment. Now, at the end of the day, I think that's just two different styles of horror. And
yeah.
I don't think one is necessarily better than the other, but if you're the person who like wants that like jump out of your seat scare factor, like a movie like Tokaido Yotsuya Kaiden is going to be giving you that much more than Carnival of Souls. I also want to ask what you think of this movie compared to the Corman Poe films, which obviously are like on the other side in terms of presentation, like widescreen, color, period movies, lots of like set dressing. But they often try to go for like these dreamy psychological moments. I mean, the other thing that's impressive about Carnival of Souls is that it keeps that up for an entire runtime of the movie and doesn't like run out of steam on it.
Yeah, like I said, with my experience, it felt like it was pushing it a little bit. It was getting a little bit like leggy.
And we watched the theatrical cut, just to be clear on this. And like we took a look at the deleted scenes and we're like, yeah, like that's some fat you can trim off the bones for sure.
Yeah.
So I think the fact that you were feeling it lagging even in like this shorter cut is worth mentioning.
Yeah. I will say I would not put this above Spiral Staircase.
Yeah.
Like above those movies. I'm even having trouble thinking about it above Old Dark House.
Mm-hmm.
If I wanted to kind of think through this a little bit, like I think it's really interesting to think about this movie with Phantom Carriage. The one thing that, structurally is a major difference is in Phantom Carriage, it was all a dream.
Yeah. I'm so glad that Carnival of Souls isn't all a dream.
Oh, yeah. It's funny. It's the same structure, except one's awakened and one's dead.
I mean, yeah, like you can make the argument of like the Owl Creek Bridge thing of like, oh, it was all something she imagined as she was dying. But even that's better than it was all a dream, because at least she's dead at the end for real.
Yeah.
The midpoint between my floor and your ceiling, our original ranges, gives 45, which is Invasion of the Body Snatchers, next to Thing from Another World, and also Lake of the Dead, which is another kind of like mood piece.
Yeah. Fairman Maria is here as well.
Fairman Maria is really strong at what it's doing. Like, and I think it's doing similar kind of stuff here, just like through the personification of death and all of that.
I hear what you're saying about why you've looked so high. I think I am struggling with it being that high. I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable with it around Fairman Maria in particular. And I'm also thinking about the way that like you could draw societal things from Carnival of Souls and number 36, I Married a Monster from Outer Space, for example. So this area feels a little bit better to me.
Would you say, because I do hear you on the societal things, like this movie, it's interesting to put the character of Mary against the social expectations of a woman at this time. But I don't think this movie is about the social expectations of a woman at this time in the way that, like, you know, Fairman Maria, Wolfman, Thing from Another World, Invasion of the Body Snatchers are all movies that are like about like a social allegory kind of concern, a wider societal thing. So like, I think this needs to go above Fiend Without a Face, frankly. And
that's another case of like, how do you like your horror?
Yeah.
Two very different tastes.
Yeah. And I think I like it better than Lake of the Dead as well, which spends a lot of its running time on like intellectual debates on natural versus supernatural.
Well, I think the fact that Carnival of Souls is so centered on one specific person really helps make it strong.
Which brings us back to like Fairman Maria.
Yeah. I think I would put this below Fairman Maria because they're both daring, like thinking about like the creation of it. Both creative teams are like striking out to try to do something that is very risky. And one is more financial and the other is more life or death.
Sure.
Political. And yeah, I think it's tough because Carnival of Souls is really strong. I would suggest below Fairman Maria, above Wolfman.
Okay. I think the lowest I would go is above Lake of the Dead. So if you feel like it can go above Wolfman, I'm pretty cool with that. Is that kind of where we're gonna land on this? Do we feel good about that?
Yeah.
Okay. Which also puts it a little bit below La Diabolique at 33, which is another movie to call out just for the like single woman against the world kind of aspect. And
the kind of forward-looking nature of it.
There's also a guy in a bathtub in that one.
But he's not supposed to be in a bathtub.
No,
he's supposed to be in the sea.
Yeah.
I think they just needed to film an insert.
So then entering the list at the new number 43 is Carnival of Souls from 1962, directed by Herk Harvey.
If you would like to see this list, you can go to our website, screamscenepodcast.com. There you can find links to the other episodes that we have mentioned today, as well as our appeals box. If you would like to contest this or any other ranking, you can drop us a line through our Ask box on Tumblr. You can reach out over email at screamscenepodcast@gmail.com or reach out over Patreon or Blue Sky.
Scream Scene updates every other Wednesday on SoundCloud. You can get the show on pretty much all the major podcasting services as well. And if you want to make sure you never miss an episode, you can subscribe to the RSS feed. If you want to help the show out, you can tell your friends about it. Like, tell everyone you know who's into horror movies, who's into Hollywood history. This is like a really cool show for getting a sense of like the history of the development of a genre, even if horror is not your particular genre. So, you know, tell your friends about it, share it online, share it on social media. That's really helpful, and we really appreciate it. Leaving a rating or a review on sites that allow you to do so is also super helpful because it makes the algorithms recommend the show to other people. And if you are able to, we would also really appreciate any financial support that you're able to give by heading on over to patreon.com/Scream Scene Podcast. You can become a patron of the night for as little as $1 a month, and we will thank you on the show. At $5 a month, you get access to bonus audio, whether that's cut content from past episodes or special new projects that mostly Sarah likes to do on the side. And at the $10 level, there's bonus writing, which could be all sorts of things, really, like reviews of other movies, travelogues sometimes, just like all the horror musings we might have that don't really fit with the regular show. So check all that out at patreon.com/Scream Scene Podcast.
So Ben, what are we watching next week?
So I just need to explain myself a little here for a moment. So initially, based on my research, my plan, I was looking at doing a movie called The Brain next week, which is a UK-German co-production and notable because Freddie Francis, who was the cinematographer on The Innocents, directs it. But Then I learned it was yet another adaptation of Donovan's Brain.
Sigh.
A story that I'm really sick of and that has regularly failed to deliver actual horror movies. And like we have regularly placed adaptations of it on the miscellaneous list. And this movie, looking into it a bit more, was described as being more concerned with the mystery plot of who killed the rich guy whose brain it is than like any kind of horror stuff about the brain forcing people to murder stuff. I read reviews that described the movie as seemingly embarrassed about the living brain element of the story and really focused on being like a mystery thriller. And so I'm like, I don't think so. So I have preemptively disqualified this movie.
Okay.
However, if there's some creatures of the night out there who have seen this one and are like, no, you're missing something really good. You should really check it out. I am willing to like reconsider if you want to get in touch with us and insist that we review The Brain. However, I'm disqualifying it, which means that what we are going to be looking at next week is Roger Corman's version of The Tower of London, a kind of period horror movie about Richard III starring Vincent Price.
This is the second time Vincent Price has been in a Tower of London type of movie.
You are exactly correct. He was in the 40s version with Basil Rathbone.
Yeah. So I don't think that was horror.
No,
did we
DQ'd it.
Yeah.
I don't think we did an episode on it. We just watched it and we were like, no, we were correct in our assumption this wasn't horror.
Yeah. It was good.
Yeah. But so like that might happen with this movie as well. But the thing is that Roger Corman and Vincent Price have a more proven track record than any adaptation of Donovan's Brain. So
we're all about batting averages here.
Yeah, even if Tower of London turns out to not be horror, I think we will at least have a good time watching it and talking about it for the show.
Yay!
So we will see you then, creatures of the night.
Bye!
Bye!